One feeling that many drivers are familiar with is that they must improve their performance or risk being pushed out of the sport. Nevertheless, today's Formula One grid is brimming with talent. Even the so-called pay drivers who provide valuable sponsorship have worked their way up through the junior Formula A. However, this has not always been the case. F1's history is littered with drivers who are often more of a danger than a competitor on track. Now, as one of the most difficult sports to enter and compete in, determining the worst F1 drivers of all time is a difficult task given the skill required just to operate a Formula One vehicle, let alone race it around multiple tracks throughout a season. That being said, let's look at some Formula One drivers who severely underperformed during their careers. Number 5. Alex Jung. After relatively little success in Formula 3, Formula 3000 and Formula Nippon, Jung became the first Malaysian driver to compete in Formula 1. Minardi sporting director Rupert Manwaring paid Jung a visit while in Malaysia to meet with potential backers for a Formula 1 seat. By the 5th of July, Jung had received sponsorship money from the government-backed Magnum Corporation, estimated to be worth $5 million by the Singapore Straits Times. The true figure was never made public. He took part in a 2-day test at Mugello, becoming the first Malaysian to do so, and the FIA granted him his super license. Jung made his Formula 1 debut in a place of Tarso Marquez at the Italian Grand Prix. Jung's running was limited during Friday practice due to electrical issues, and Saturday free practice was cut short due to gearbox trouble. He did not complete a flying lap during qualifying due to gearbox issues and had to share the spare car with teammate Fernando Alonso. Jung dropped out of the race in 15th place. Jung retired from the next race in Indianapolis after 38 laps due to a gearbox failure and finished 3 laps down later at Suzuka. 2002 was not kinder to the Malaysian. Utterly outclassed by new teammate Mark Webber, Jung found himself replaced by none other than Anthony Davidson, ending his F1 career with 0 points scored. Number 4. Marco Apicella. Marco Apicella made the list because he holds the record for the shortest Formula 1 race career in history. Although actually, that isn't entirely true. We'll explain later. Apicella's strong performance in Japan in 1992 and 1993 earned him a seat in the Jordan Formula 1 team for his home race in Monza in the 1993 season, with team boss Eddie Jordan keen to try out young Formula 3000 drivers. He took over for Thierry Boutsen. Before the race, Apicella also tested the Jordan 193 car at Imola. In Monza, he qualified 23rd, half a second behind teammate Barrichello, who set his times later in the session after a previously rain-soaked circuit had partially dried out. Apicella retired at the first corner of the first lap of the race after a multi-car collision. He was then replaced in the following round in Portugal by Emmanuel Naspetti. As a result, he is mistakenly thought to have had the shortest Formula 1 career of any driver, a record that is actually held by Ernst Luff. Apicella retired after 800 meters, while Luff's car broke down as it was just pulling away from the starting line. Nevertheless, having the second shortest F1 career is nothing to brag about. Number 3. Giovanna Amati. There is no doubt that Formula 1 is a male-dominated sport, although there have been a number of female racing legends in other categories, such as Michelle Mouton in rally and Danica Patrick in NASCAR. F1 has not had the same luxury. All the more unfortunate is that the most recent female F1 driver has been, well, let's just say, not great. Giovanna Amati joined the Brabham team in January 1992 to partner Eric van der Poel after the team was unable to sign Japanese F3000 driver Akihiko Nakaya because the FIA did not recognize the Japanese F3000 series as a stepping stone into motor racing. The announcement of a female driver boosted the Brabham team's profile, but unfortunately, the reality was that Amati had little experience driving Formula 1 machinery prior to the first round in South Africa because mechanics were still working on her car. Amati's inexperience was evident on the track in South Africa after spinning 6 times during practice. She was unable to qualify after setting a time that was 9 seconds slower than pole sitter Nigel Mansell and 4 seconds slower than teammate Van der Poel during qualifying. Amati had failed to qualify for the second consecutive race in Mexico, having set a time more than 10 seconds slower than Mansell. At the next race in Brazil, Amati again failed to qualify for the race, this time with a 11 seconds slower than Mansell in Friday qualifying. Saturday qualifying improved slightly, but Amati still did not qualify. Brabham fired Amati shortly after the race and replaced her with Damon Hill, which is probably the biggest swing in performance an F1 car has ever had to experience. Number 2. Taki Inui. Inui was born in the Japanese city of Kobe. In 1988, he raced in the British Formula Ford Championship, then in All Japan Formula 3 from 1989 to 1993, and in the International Formula 3000 Championship in 1994. He raced in 18 Formula 1 Grand Prix events. His debut was a one-off race for the Simtek at the 1994 Japanese Grand Prix, from which he retired. He spent the next year at Footwork Arrows. But instead of his mediocre driver, he is perhaps best known for two bizarre incidents that occurred while driving for Footwork in 1995. The first incident occurred following a practice session in Monaco. While his stalled car was being towed back to the pits, it was hit by a Renault Clio course car driven by Gene Ragnotti, causing Inui to roll into the barriers. The second occurred during the Hungarian Grand Prix, which was broadcast live around the world. While attempting to assist the marshal in putting out the engine fire that had forced him out of the race, a safety car, Tatra 623, driven to the scene by a marshal, hit him, injuring his leg, although he recovered in time for the next race. His teammate for the majority of the season was Gianni Morbidelli. But late in the season, Max Papis replaced Morbidelli and was occasionally outpaced by Inui. Inui lobbied Tyrrell for a drive in the 1996 season, but the team chose Ukyo Katayama, with his mild 7 sponsorship money from Japan Tobacco. Instead, he was announced as the driver for the Minardi team in January. However, one of his personal sponsors withdrew at the last minute and Inui was forced to retire from F1. He retired from racing at the end of 1999 after a brief stint in sports cars and now manages drivers in his home country. Inui is also known for his self-depreciating humor, having publicly declared himself the worst driver in Formula 1, admitting that he had no idea what a pit stop was at first and stating in an interview with Top Gear magazine in 2015 that he was not good enough to drive in F1. Number 1. Yuji Ide. Yuji Ide, our second Japanese driver on the list, was one of the oldest F1 rookies to take to the grid in 2006 at the age of 31. But that is not why his name will live in infamy, as Ide was the only driver in F1 history to lose his super license for unsafe driving. He landed his spot at Super Aguri for the 2006 season, thanks in part to Super Aguri's desire to field an all-Japanese team. According to a press release, Ide had known Aguri Suzuki for a long time, but his fit with the team was hampered by his inability to communicate in English. Ide finished significantly behind his more experienced teammate Takuma Sato in his debut race in Bahrain. At the next race in Malaysia, he retired after 33 laps. During qualifying at the Australian Grand Prix, Ide was blamed for blocking Ruben Barrichello during his qualifying lap, causing the Brazilian to be stuck in the first round of qualifying and started 16th on the grid. Ide finished the race in 13th place, 2 laps down. His weekend in Melbourne was notable for a number of spins, and team principal Aguri Suzuki later suggested that Ide's seat was not safe unless his performance improved. At Imola, Ide collided with Christian Albers on the first lap, sending the Dutchman into a series of rolls that ended with the Albers car upside down. The stewards reprimanded Ide and warned him about his future behaviour. Aguri Suzuki stated at the time he didn't have enough testing because he doesn't understand how to use the car. Super Aguri announced on May 4, 2006 that Ide would be dropped from the upcoming European Grand Prix at the Nürburgring due to FIA advice that he needed more experience. Frank Montagny, the team's third driver, took his place and Ide was demoted to his spot. The FIA revoked Ide's FIA Super license on May 10, 2006, effectively ending his F1 career for the 2006 season. Following the news, Super Aguri said that Aguri Suzuki and Aguri Company shall continue to seek driving opportunities for Yuji, and hopefully a path back into Formula 1. Spoiler alert, that didn't happen, and Yuji Ide is still considered by some to be the worst F1 driver in history. That concludes our list. What were your thoughts on the drivers we mentioned? Are they truly the worst? Is there anyone we didn't add who you believe deserves to be considered the worst F1 driver ever? Let us know in the comments section down below, and if you liked the video, be sure to like and subscribe. Also, if you want to be notified of future videos, go ahead and click the bell icon. Your support is greatly appreciated.